What is going on, Nittany Nation? Welcome to the Penn State Rivals YouTube channel. And on this episode, we have a preview for this weekend's matchup with Maryland traveling to Penn State. It's always a chippy one, especially in the last few years. So joining me on this one, I have Sam Jane from the Terrapin Sports Report. Yes, basketball season's coming up, but Sam, we have a great matchup this weekend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, are you going to the game this weekend or?
I will be in attendance. My first time
Awesome.
out of Happy Valley, so I'm excited.
Really good. I'll be there too, so definitely going to link up. But just going into this matchup, Maryland's 6-3, 3-3 in the conference. With the expectations that was set before the season, how do you think Maryland's really, sitting right now compared to what you expected?
Yeah, so, coming into the year, Maryland, this was going to be Mike Loxley's best team since he's been here. You had a lot of returning talent with Rakim Jarrett, Talia Tagovailoa. You got breaking in some new faces that are talented on offense, Corey Dyches. We got Jacob Copeland coming in from Florida. So a lot of really good skill positions, and this was going to be his best offensive line since he came here as well. A lot of Terps fans looked at this one as him having his best season, and he's on track to do that. Potentially looking at an 8-win season, which would be his best record since he got here. But that's gonna, it's gonna come down to them winning a big game, frankly, and they haven't really done that so far. They lost in a tight one, admittedly, on the road at Michigan. Got destroyed in Camp Randall against Wisconsin. I think that was kind of one of a more demoralizing loss for Terps fans because you go into that one and Wisconsin's having, they're a great program, but they're having a down year, firing Paul Chris, obviously, Jim Leonard coming in. But that was a tough one. And then, you got two big ones here, Penn State on the road, obviously, and then next week coming back home to Ohio State. So if they manage to pull one of these next two off, I think that'll go a long way in outpacing the expectations coming into the year. But right now, I'd say they're maybe a tiny bit above or right at where Terps fans thought they would be heading into the year.
Yeah, honestly, I said before the season, like talent-wise, I think Maryland has the second best wide receiver corps in the Big Ten. Like you said, Jacob Copeland come over from Florida. And they already had such a stacked talent there at wide receiver. Now, this matchup, this might surprise you. Kind of surprised me a little bit just because of, the styles with the two teams. Penn State right now is a 10-point favorite sitting at a minus 420 money line, over under at 57. Does that line with a 10-point favorite kind of surprise you at all?
To be honest, I know you said that's I would say not really. I think in Penn State's case, a lot of the strengths of the Nittany Lions match up well with Maryland's strengths, right? So Talia is best when you let him play in structure, or when you let him get into a rhythm, and he's able to, find those receivers who, in all honesty, I would agree with you. Coming into the year, I would have had them ranked second in the Big Ten, but they've underperformed a little bit. Rakim Jarrett's had some issues with drops. Dante Demas never has really gotten back on track to where he was pre his ACL injury. But they're still the strength of the offense, I would say. And obviously Penn State, as you know, I'm sure, has two probably NFL caliber corners, Kalen King, Joey Porter Jr. especially. Those are two guys that are probably the strength of the Nittany Lion defense. I know you can speak to that more than I can, but they're going to match up well, I would say, with Maryland's receivers, which should limit the amount of scoring that the Terps can do. And then on defense, you're looking at Sean Clifford coming into the year, who obviously a veteran quarterback. I think his ability to not turn the ball over against Maryland will be key because Maryland has had some success with takeaways this year. But they really just got torn apart on the ground against Wisconsin, and Graham Mertz didn't even really have to throw it. So if that continues with Penn State's rushing attack that I think has improved this year, especially compared to years in the past.
Yeah, big time.
I don't think 10 is necessarily that unrealistic of a spread, especially on the road where you get, usually 3 points or so being the home favorite. So if you told me last week the spread was 10, I would have said maybe that's a little high. But after the Wisconsin game, I don't think that's unjustified at all.
Yeah, that Wisconsin game was straight out ugly. I was looking at Talia's stats last week. I was like, great day. He's been one of the better quarterbacks. And something I also saw was against the blitz. Talia is outstanding. He's the second highest grade from PFF of 90.3 against the blitz. So if you look at, Adisa Isaac or guy, I want to ask you about Chop Robinson, yeah, you want to get pressure with the 4, but you don't really want to blitz those extra linebackers. You kind of want to drop in coverage against Talia, something that Michigan did, but he still had success. I don't think those 2 picks were picks, by the way, against Michigan.
Nah, definitely not one of them for sure.
No, that first one definitely was. But I think that was
Nah,
such a winnable game, and that's what I kind of go
was.
back to when I look at this Maryland team compared to how Penn State, favored against Michigan. It was close for like a quarter and a half, if that. So I like this Maryland team, but let's talk about losing a guy like Chop Robinson, who has just been outstanding for Penn State this season.
Yeah.
What have you seen from him this year so far, and how do you think, how big of a loss was that for Maryland?
Yeah, Chop Robinson has really turned into Penn State's best edge rusher. I mean, you look at the history of edge rushers at Penn State, and they produce freaks, frankly. I mean, Arnold Ebiketie, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name.
Yeah, Ebiketie, yep.
Stud at Penn State, obviously. I mean, you got other guys along the way. And Chop Robinson, I think, is going to be the next lineage. I mean, really good bend off the edge. He can play in coverage as well, which is something I'm impressed. Dropping him out a little bit. I know Manny Diaz likes to run those kind of disguised fronts where brings a linebacker, drops a defensive end. So Robinson has the athleticism to do that. And kind of speaking to how bad Maryland misses him, I mean, I think it's a big loss, right? Maryland's pass rush has been okay, but it hasn't really been able to necessarily have that elite. We got a one-on-one battle. This guy's going to win it. We can count on him. Jay-Sean Barnum, who's a freshman linebacker, he kind of plays more of the will role, but they like to bring him on passing downs to kind of affect the quarterback. And I think that more so speaks to the lack of true number one pass rusher, more so than it speaks to, Barnum is just this ridiculous talent off the edge. Great player. But I think that they don't really have that number one, which I think Chop would have been for them if he had stayed. So I would expect probably got to, coming off the edge, you probably got to devote Roman Hemby, the running back, to Chop and pass protection. And then, hope Talia's escapability will be able to avoid him, because one thing that I would watch out for is I know Penn State's defense sometimes isn't the best in terms of gap integrity rushing the passer. So if Talia can scramble out and keep, run outside the pocket or step up and take off, he is really good at that, playing outside of structure. So something I would watch out for. But yeah, going back to your original question, sorry, I kind of rambled on. Chop is definitely somebody the Terps missed, because he would give them that number one pass rusher that they don't really have.
Yeah, that was one thing that was killer. You mentioned the gap integrity against Michigan. Like, obviously with the run game and the success they had, it's like guys were getting into the backfield, but there was no one to help fill in that gap, and they were just shooting right through it. So that's a big thing I want to ask you about too, is Roman Hemby, someone who's impressed me a lot. Maryland, I feel like they haven't been too balanced the last few years. I mean, they've produced some, solid running backs. But it seems like this year they finally have a solid run game going. What has impressed you with, Maryland's ability to run the ball this year?
I think it's really just the complement of backs they have, right? I mean, Hemby's been the guy the past couple weeks, but before him it was Antoine Littleton, really big bruiser back. Yeah. They call him Baby Bus in reference to Jerome Bettis. I mean, the guy's a tank. You're looking at, he's somebody that can provide definitely some power, something in the power game. And then Hemby really I think Hemby's one cut and go type of running style is among the best in the Big Ten. I mean, you got great running backs in the Big Ten, right? Chase Brown, Blake Corum, Travion Henderson. These are all guys that are going to be NFL draft picks. But Hemby's ability just to find the hole and go, the one cut ability, is probably among the best in the Big Ten, which has really impressed me, because Maryland likes to run that, wide zone scheme, where they're getting guys out in space and letting him kind of pick the hole. And he's been so good at that, especially as a redshirt freshman, where Loxley has been super impressed. And he also has done really well in pass protection, like I said, with which you're going to ask for him on third down, which has found him the ability to get on the field. And so, unfortunately for Maryland, in the big games, it hasn't really shown up, the running game. Like Wisconsin last week, you're looking at a freaking terrible weather conditions, and they just could not run the ball. I mean, Hemby never was able really to find any sort of space. Now, Wisconsin's run defense is probably top. It's always good, right? But they weren't able really to do it then. It never necessarily was super effective against Purdue. So, I mean, these games that they lose, it's a pretty clear disparity of Maryland can run the ball and can't run the ball. Because when you're putting it all on Talia, it just results in, I think, not as effective as an offensive strategy, which is the same for every offense, but especially for Maryland when guys are being able to pin their ears back and just go after the quarterback.
Yeah, so when I really look at this matchup, I'm trying to find where Penn State, like on offense, can really make a difference. And not saying that Maryland is like Indiana, but I think they need to have somewhat of the same approach of setting up that run game because Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton both had huge weeks. Obviously, it was the Katron Allen show last week, though. Having those two freshman running backs, you talk about, Maryland's run game. What's impressed you with two freshmen really kind of taking over what's been super stale of a run game the last 2-3 years for Penn State? And do you think that could be an area of concern when you look at Maryland's defense, who allows about 140 yards rushing per game?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Penn State, I think that when you come into a game like this, the offensive line at Penn State, I think, is improved as well, not just the freshman running backs. I mean, you got a top 10 pick probably at left tackle, and
Olu. He's out, but I mean, they don't know how long.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to go this weekend, but still, throughout the course of the season, I mean, I know Dane Brugler at The Athletic loves him. So you got an improved offensive line up front, obviously, and then Katron Allen, I think, really, especially in terms of the ability for him just to pick up the tough yards. I know Singleton is also kind of more of the home run threat, if I'm incorrect in that. He's been more of the long speed guy. But Allen, I think having a consistent running back that you can count on to go get yards, I think is super important to Penn State's offense, because then it can kind of set up those quick screens that the Lions like to run to the outside, to Washington, Tinsley, those guys. So having, Clifford not playing out of 3rd and 10, but more so 3rd and 3, I think does a lot of wonders to that offense. And that's largely in part due to Allen's just overall consistency. So I know last week he averaged like 5 yards on the ground with a long of 12 or something. Yeah. And that speaks to maybe not his big play, but I think having that type of running back is so important, especially when you are just using the run, more so to get your veteran quarterback comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Virginia boy, so what do you expect out of Katron Allen? Biggest play came on that catch where it kind of honestly reminded me of Saquon Barkley, how he's like going up the left sideline and just cuts across the open field, and defenders are like, it's like Madden. You're like, I can't tackle you when you're sitting there just doing like these moves the whole time. So you bring up Sean Clifford, rightfully so. And here, with Penn State, you realize there's a lot of people that love Sean Clifford, and then there's a lot of people.
Aller?
Yeah, people are just pushing the Drew Aller train heavily. And of course, you saw a good sample of Drew Aller last week. But I have to ask you, because I asked this with literally every guest. I mean, Kevin Noon with Ohio State gave me his thoughts. What do you think of Sean Clifford from like an outsider's perspective? Just someone who is watching him, in these big games or, just any kind of circumstances.
Yeah. No, yeah, I try to pay attention to Penn State just because around the Big Ten, obviously. And I always have thought Sean Clifford's kind of gotten a bad rap in Happy Valley, to be honest. And not necessarily in that I don't think Drew Aller is deserving of playing time, right? Like, it's not comparing him to the other. It's more so I think the guy's kind of gotten a bad shake. Those offensive lines, not necessarily this year, but the past years have been terrible. Like, I remember watching the Michigan game, and Hutchinson and Ojabo were just laying into him the entire game. I'm like, how is this guy still playing? And so when you're constantly having to deal with, pressure in your face, it's understandable why I think sometimes he gets a little skittery in the pocket. And I think that I watched a film thing that kind of showed that might have led to some of the interceptions against Ohio State to Tula Malalo. But from an outsider's view, I think Clifford's a solid Big Ten quarterback. I think he's probably in that top 5 right now with Talia and O'Connell and Stroud, obviously. But if I were Penn State, if I were Franklin, I think towards the end of the season, I think it's probably time to start giving Aller some run just because of the future of the program. Clifford's obviously, it's his team. I get that. But, I mean, he's a 6th year. He is what he is at this point. You're not winning a playoff game with him. He's not that level of quarterback. So, I mean, I would let the young kid go, but I get why Clifford is still out there for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, this is a huge game this weekend because Penn State's still going for that New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of guys, Brett McMurphy, are projecting them to be in that New Year's Six Bowl if they win out. So this game, I don't know. For me, it feels like kind of a trap game. I was listening to Scott Van Pelt talk about it. Last week, he took Indiana plus 14 against Penn State. He said he regretted that. He kind of is leaning more towards Penn State minus 10. You said you are too. So something I always ask is – go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was on the Lions last week and it paid off, so I was happy with
Oh yeah,
that.
no, I definitely bet Penn State. But I have to ask you because I ask this with every guest I have. Come Sunday, what's the headline on this game? And you can give a score prediction with it if you want.
Oh boy, good question. I'm gonna say headline: Talia Tagovailoa throws costly interception, leading to a Penn
Oof.
State clinching victory. I think that it's tight throughout the first three quarters. I think Maryland, this is, they're looking to with a chip on their shoulder. This is a quote unquote rivalry game, but it ain't been a rivalry, and I think they're looking to change that this year. So I think when you're looking at first couple quarters, I think Talia is on point. Last week he was terrible. I think this week he's better, and I think you see Rakim Jarrett kind of have one of his better games. I know scouts will be there watching that matchup between him and Porter, and so keeps it close to the three quarters. And then I think Talia throws a pretty interception. Chop Robinson bearing down on him, kind of throws one of those
Oh no,
inexplicable. You're like,
gotta be Chop.
what the heck are you doing, Talia? That type of moment because he has one of those a game. And then I think Clifford just puts it away in the fourth. I'm probably looking at like a 34-20, 34-20, 34-23 Penn State win.
That's good. That's what I was close to points wise.
Late backdoor cover.
Oh yeah, those are the ones that always come in clutch. For me, the only thing that really worries me is we've seen some communication issues in the back end at safety. Of course now with Jair Brown, I'm not gonna call anybody out. But then also in the middle of the field too. I don't know why, but Manny Diaz loves rotating his linebackers like every single play, and I hate it because I'm like, just have Curtis Jacobs, who's banged up, and Abdul Carter, like your best linebackers on the field 85-90% of the time. They're just every down, it seems like they're rotating. And it's led to some, big plays across the middle. So I think Talia's smart. I think he's going to be watching film. He's going to see that and see where he needs to really attack the defense. I don't think he's going to be doing too much sideline to sideline. Like I said, Joey Porter Jr., you got both King brothers. So I think Penn State does win this one. I think Talia bounced back definitely from what he had last week. But I think Penn State's defense takes a step back. This might be a hot take. I think they take a step back in the pass defense, but the run game is what really helps them out. I think Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton gets things going again. -10, what the heck? I'm going for it. I say a 13-point win, Penn State. But Sam, I appreciate you coming on, man. It was a good time chopping it up. Like you said, you'll be there. I'll be there as well. It's going to be a great time. So I appreciate you taking some time out, man.
Appreciate it, man. Let me know the spots in Happy Valley. I'm excited to get down there. Have a good rest of your night, bro.
Yeah, man. It's only my second time, so I'm still trying to figure it out, too. But appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll see y'all after the game for a recap video, as always, in the James Franklin press conference. We'll see y'all on the Penn State Rivals YouTube channel.